Well, hello. Been doing some research, and guess what? Paul may have pulled a Rutherford. What do we mean by that? The Apostle Paul may not be who we think he is. And we've been doing a little bit of research. I'll just share a little bit of this with you. And it kind of fits a lot of my feelings. And I haven't researched any of this stuff before. My last thumbnail, Paul versus Jesus, it was interesting, some of the feedback that came in from you guys, the subscribers. And I appreciate that because I went on and did some research further, and it led me down another path. And what I feel this has done for me is I actually unlayered some layers of weight with the Bible. And it's allowed me to to stand back and to take an objective look at the Bible itself, to see if it's a holy book, or if it's what is it? What is the Bible? And just on the surface, when I look at the Bible, I think the Bible, like I said in my last video, we have to take it with a grain of salt. And when we go around the world and we see what's in common all around the world, we can look at the Ten Commands and we can see some commonality. When I look at Paul, and he talks about setting up congregations and how to run these congregations. Well, Paul never ever knew Jesus, never met the guy, but yet Paul, he was out persecuting the Christians, and then one day he had this vision. So he self-appointed himself. That's Paul. And it's like Rutherford. Rutherford is self-appointed. Now, when I was a Jehovah's Witness, we were taught to just believe in everything, believe in the Bible, just have faith that if God is the God of the universe, that God is going to have an instruction book, and God's going to make sure that this instruction book comes all the way down through history until it gets into Rutherford's hands. And then Rutherford can make the decision, and then NOR, and then the governing body today can make the decision on to whether the Bible should be changed or whatever. And they've changed it in places to suit their doctrine, of course. So when I step away back and look at all of this, Paul was the first guy to start rewriting the Old Testament, rewriting the epistles, the teachings of Jesus. And then what I found in my research is that there's actually different kinds of Christians. There was the Nazarenes, there was the true followers of Jesus, the ones that knew him, the family members, and they were Jews. The 12 apostles were Jews, and they practiced the law, and they practiced the law after Jesus died. So Jesus didn't do away with the law as we were taught, but this came through Paul's writings. So Paul had some 40 years later, of course, Jesus died 40, 50 years later. Paul's got some, he's got his interest. He has a vested interest here. So now all of a sudden, Paul has some light from Jehovah. Sound familiar? Yeah. So Paul has this new light, and he's taken the old stuff and everything that's current of his day, the epistles, all these guys that seen Jesus and followed the law. Well, Paul has a problem because he's not circumcised, and he doesn't want to let anybody go down there, and he's going to change this. So he goes and has a meeting and says, we've got to change this because we're going out. He says, I'm going to specialize and go out to the Gentiles. At least that's what he wrote. That's what's in the Bible, if we can trust all that. So anyways, Paul changed it so he didn't have to be under the law. And then he taught the Gentiles that, yeah, you're no longer under it. So this leads a person. Now I can understand some of the comments online about this law. It's a touchy subject. And but if we get in and start looking, and I think we all have to do our own research as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and we all got to figure out our own faith anyways. For me, I'm sharing what I'm doing on my channel. Someday I hope my kids will look at it. I might be long gone by then, but that's okay. And in the meantime, I'm having fun sharing some of this stuff. But it's interesting. It's an interesting path. It's an interesting journey for an ex-Jehovah's Witness to come out of the cult and then to look around and think, oh, maybe the Bible's a bit of a cult. Paul started a bit of a cult, and it makes sense. I've always believed that it's all about money, organized religion, and Paul, I don't think he was any different. He was organizing it. He needed funds. He needed money to, and he probably had good motives, just like Rutherford and these guys. But at the end, it's their ego. And I think if you do the research, you'll find that Paul talked about it being my gospel, mine. And that's just like Rutherford. The governing body today, it's our, whatever we say goes. And this is a man ego thing. I think Paul, his thorn in his side was his ego. He was a prominent, powerful man. He was a Pharisee. That's where he came from, persecuting Christians, and in the Judaish system, probably organizing the church of all the, getting all the churches going, and then he could write letters. Well, he wrote 27 books apparently, but there's discrepancies. Some say he wrote 7, and then 13 were added by other writers, and they threw in the name Paul. But all of this, you can see how it's supporting organized religion back then, and it's organizing this. And then they take this Christian religion, and if we follow it through Constantine and all the way through, it's a bloody religion. It was a bloody religion. It's a self-righteous religion. It's a religion that's designed to say we're the only ones. And so, it gives permission to the Romans, once they adopted this, to go out and kill people over religion, over this religion. So it's sorry, I keep hitting my mic, but this is something I think every one of us has to look at and give it a serious look. Here's just a little bit of my research. The Apostle Paul, and you don't have to go far to find this. I didn't realize that this was a thing. I always just trusted everything. And isn't that what got us down the rabbit hole for 30 years in the Watchtower? By trusting. So I no longer trust. And now with the internet, we can really check things out if we want. Now, the Apostle Paul was either a fraud or gravely misguided, one or the other. So you don't have to go far. There's a lot of discussion on Reddit all over the place on the Apostle Paul. I didn't realize that. Was the Apostle Paul actually a false prophet? The theory that the Apostle Paul was a false prophet and not a true follower of Christ is usually put forth by those of the Hebrew roots. Now, you see, so you have that side of it. You have the Christians defending it, trying to defend, because they have so much invested into religion, into the Apostle Paul. Because you see, the Apostle Paul allows disfellowshipping and all kinds of unruly things, like with an organized religion, to control people. That's what the Apostle Paul, it's like a religion of its own. What did the Jews accuse Paul of? Well, at one point, the Jews from Asia confronted Paul in the temple and caused a riot against him. They accused him of teaching against the law of Moses and the temple, and of bringing a Gentile into the inner courts of the temple. So there was issues. Paul had issues. He was a dominant man. He was like a Rutherford, and he was pushy. So everything you know about the Gospel of Paul, you can do your own research. Now, one of the subscribers online suggested, actually gave me a link to this site, and I thought this was interesting. Jews for Judaism. So I watched a couple of theirs on the Apostle Paul, the Apostle Paul's claim for divine revelation. And this guy's a really good speaker. We can listen to him just for a bit here. And but I enjoyed his seminars. I listened to a couple of them. And they went right back to the roots. These rabbis know the history, and everything he was saying, after you spend 30 years in the JW, you went through that Bible a number of times. Now, sure, it was slanted toward the JW, but you're still reading a lot of the stories, and when these guys talk about it, it's there, it's in our minds. And I found it interesting. I think this is good for any ex-JW to really do the research, and like some of the listeners have invited me to do. And this really opened my eyes. But I'll just play a little bit of it. Here's just kind of how he speaks.
Any event, even if it did, it's It's a declaration by someone who's not empowered by God to make a decision like this. At the end of the day, what this is a serious Christian scholar, what he claims in his 5 points is that what establishes the credibility and the credentials of Paul as someone who is able to reveal the will of God is simply that Paul claims that God speaks to him. And that's it. And so what we saw previously is that that doesn't cut the mustard. That you do not get credibility as a prophet just because you claim to be one. You don't even get credibility as a prophet because you can do miracles. And the Christian Bible does claim that Paul did a few miracles, but miracles also don't establish a person as being a true prophet. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 13, tells us that even false prophets are able to do incredible supernatural miracles. Miracles in and of themselves do not prove someone is a legitimate prophet. And it's interesting that in this article, Don Stewart doesn't mention any of the miracles that Paul allegedly did. So his entire case is based upon simply Paul's assertion that he is someone who heard from God.
So, does that sound familiar? To me, that sounds like Rutherford, Russell, all these false prophets. Rutherford, I don't know if Paul made, I don't know what Paul did with dates and times, but Rutherford and Russell, these guys really took it to the 10th degree, putting all these false dates and getting all the people expecting false dates in time dates. And when I was listening to this guy, false prophets, and he talks about false prophets and how Deuteronomy talks about false prophets. We used that in one of our previous videos. And he's saying it was a death sentence, serious matter to be a false prophet, a serious matter. So I go to bed tonight and I wake up tomorrow with I'm enlightened. I have these ideas. Must be from God. I'm going to get on my channel and tell everyone it's from God. You see, I become a false prophet because we all have ideas. We're all enlightened. We all are inspired by something. And in fact, like this guy is saying, we can have something supernatural happen. It doesn't mean that we're a prophet. It doesn't. Now, I like what he said earlier in this talk. He talked about Moses, and God spoke to Moses. The people knew. The people heard God speak to Moses. Moses was a prophet. No one denied it. There was proof. So I just think we have a lot to learn yet as XG. I know I do. And I'm going to share whatever I'm learning as I go. So thanks for joining in. And here's the last thing that I learned. So let's say some of this stuff, where do we fit as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, as people? We start questioning things. Paul, I don't question God. I'm not questioning God at all. But I question Paul, just naturally I question Paul, because I was wondering, why is Jesus so loving and Jesus isn't judging, but yet Paul over here is doing something different. He's kind of running his own ship. And I was really happy that I got some feedback from you guys, because it led me down this path. So now this path is the 7 laws of Noah. And according to for the Jewish New Religious Movement, you can see Noahidism. I said that wrong. I know I did. But this is the 7 laws of Noah. And I thought this was really interesting. They call it the Noahide laws. And so it was for the Gentiles. So I'm going to go down this, do a little bit more research on this. It's quite interesting. The 7 laws. I like the word 7. And it's basically the 10 commandments. Not to worship idols, not to curse God, not to commit murder, not to commit adultery or sexual immorality, not to steal. Here's an interesting one. Number 6, not to eat flesh from a living animal. So I put on there, and you notice the squids and stuff coming up. So they don't eat living things, worms, bugs, anything living. Number 7, to establish courts of justice. So these 7 laws are to the Gentile nations, and they're expecting us to live under these, to have courts of justice. We do have a judiciary system in our land. We're Gentile land. And I thought it's interesting. And most of the world lives up to the 7 laws, the Noahide laws, for the most part. It's something that we can personally look into. And I think this is an interesting road to go down and really take a close look at it. And it gives us a different look on the law and the law of Moses and respecting it. Yeah, I know it has for me. And all I can do is encourage you to take a look. I'll put a link to the video on the end of this site, but this is where I'm at so far. So and remember, once we start looking at this, it kind of changes the deity, the Trinity whole thing. And I'm not done there yet. That's up for dispute. Like we go down this path, and Jesus is more like a prophet, like some of the other religious prophets. So it's interesting when we look at this. Jesus no longer is a God. I don't think so. Not in Judaism, because there's only one God, and that's YHWH. And we don't pronounce that because I'm not a high priest. At least I don't want to offend anybody. But here we are. This is how far down the rabbit hole we are, and we'll keep going. But friends, until next time, keep living your life with love, because I think living your life with love is really, it still it covers all these laws. And, except the eating of living animals. I don't do that anyways. That's not a big deal for me. But all the other stuff, just being a good neighbor. You're not going to murder. If you believe that there's a God, you're not going to curse God. You're not going to worship other idols if you believe that there's one God. Those are easy things. Sexual immorality, adultery, these are common sense stuff. So it's kind of built within us. It's almost right within us, these laws. And I think as I'm moving forward out of this rabbit hole, I'm realizing that trust your gut. If your gut says there's something wrong with this teaching, even if it's in the Bible, do some research. Like my gut was telling me there's something wrong with Paul. Disfellowship them, kick them out, judge them within. Judge them within. And Jesus went on to say, don't judge, don't pick the straw to your brother's eye. Don't do any of that. But yet Paul is saying, judge them and get them out of it. Yeah. For me, this has kind of taken my brain to a different level. I can look at things objectively, even Paul. And if you're a real stern believer in that whole Bible that's been written and rewritten so many times, well, how easy could it be for someone to put something in at the end and say, don't change any of this or believe it all? If I was a Roman and I want to control people with the Bible, I could throw little things like that in all over the place. Make money off people, control them. You got to come through me. Don't add or change. If you do, I'm going to burn you at the stake. If you're not part of this religion. This religious biblical movement has a bloody past, a bloody history. And I don't think that was Jesus. Nothing to do with Jesus. The further I researched this, it was nothing to do with Jesus. This was all later. This is Paul started this movement. And then the Romans took it over. Really slick. Paul wasn't a Jew. He had no vested interest except control, ego, and writing books. Getting out there. Loved to hear himself speak, just like Rutherford. That's my take now. Throw your comments in. I'd be curious to hear them. Anyways, bye for now, and keep doing this. Till next time.